Kilian Schulte is a Flutter and Dart expert, the creator of Jaspr, a web framework that lets you build websites in Dart, and the author of other really nice packages like Dart Mappable, a serialization package that he's been working on for over 3 years already. He's based in Munich. He's a mobile consultant at NetLight, and before all this, he co-founded a cycling mobility startup called Upright that he worked with cities to improve urban cycling. Kilian, welcome to Very Good Engineering.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I've seen you've done your research on the startup background. That's fun.
Yeah, it's certainly that. I like to have a clean aesthetic over there. And it's also nice to kind of brag a little bit about all the work that we've been able to do. So thank you for noticing. Uh let's get started with a very simple but very big question. What is Jasper?
So for those that have never heard of it, it's a framework to build websites. So traditional website, HTML and CSS based, but it is fully written in Dart and it looks a lot like Flutter. So I'm saying it looks a lot. It's not Flutter. It works slightly different, but you still write components which work in a very similar way to widgets. You have stateless, stateful, inherited components, and they work kind of the same. And it's all designed to feel very familiar for a Flutter developer.
That's great. So you were targeting those core Flutter developers that we tend to believe that we know how to do websites, but there's so many different types of websites, right? Know that Flutter has been talking about well, we shine when we build web apps that there's a lot of interactivity and things like that, but there's a lot of websites that are very important in this world that they just render sometimes static content, or if they have state is very minimal, right?
Exactly, yeah. So it's kind of for all the things that Flutter Web isn't really your choice of technology. And yeah, like if so I like the web a lot, but I really don't enjoy writing JavaScript that much. So it's kind of I build it for myself and for everyone who is kind of like me, that they may want to build websites, but can do it now completely in Dart.
When did you start working on Jasper, and how did that idea happen of there's not enough web frameworks, let me build one more for Flutter developers, even though it's not Flutter.
Yeah, so I started this almost 4 years ago now.
Hmm.
And so my background is in web development.
Hmm.
So I did web development before coming into Flutter. Um, and then at some point I discovered that there's like a Dart to JS compiler, which in theory allows you to build websites in Dart. And I just started experimenting with that. And I quickly noticed that there isn't really anything framework wise there for Dart to build websites. There was Flutter. I think it was even before Flutter Web was a thing. And all you had is just raw manual DOM manipulation that you could do with Dart on the web. Um, so I just had as a technical challenge for myself over a weekend, sat down, wanted to build a little prototype. How could I do declarative component system, which is kind of like Flutter, but for then outputting HTML and CSS instead of painting to a canvas.
Just a weekend.
I mean, the very initial base prototype of this could actually work, and then of course after that a lot more weekends and a lot more hours into that. Um, but that was kind of the initial yeah, how it started.
Did you picture back then how big of a task would this be?
Oh, no way. No. Like I had no idea. I didn't even plan for it to become a big framework or anything a lot of people use actually. It was still really just curiosity. But then since I already had one or two open source packages on pub, I thought, well, I can just publish it there as well and see if people like it. Uh, and then it kind of just grew very dynamically from there.
Did you always intended to build Jasper in the open?
Um, Pretty much, yeah. So after the initial um like making it work as a package for myself. I always said, okay, I can just make this open source and other people can use it. Hopefully someone contributes something to it. And yeah, and then I kind of, so the first way um I like try to get feedback from people was through Reddit. Because like the Dart subreddit was kind of the only place I knew back there to like reach people. And it was pretty good feedback there.
Yeah, I think that I remember like the when you kind of like launched like what was like the version 1.0 or something like that, that you made a announcement in Reddit. Like, what was the feedback back then? Like, was it like even though like I would imagine it's positive because you continue working really hard on this, but like it's one of those in which like I can see people going like to many different like points of view of whatever. Like, what do you remember about those days?
Yeah, so the initial Reddit post was very successful. I think it's like one of, or even the most upvoted post on the Dart subreddit or something. At least the last time I checked. So a lot of interest, a lot of people liked it, gave good feedback, were excited about it. Um, and that kind of for the first time also kept me motivated to continue to work on it. I think if I wouldn't have gotten that good of feedback there, I probably wouldn't have spent that much time on it.
Yeah, and this is one of the beautiful things I think about the Flutter and Dart communities. Like, it's a very supportive community, even after all these years with so many people. That doesn't mean that they won't tell you like, hey, I think that this can be better, this can be improved, but it's done in a way that feels always constructive, not like an attack like you can observe in other kind of like parts of the tech ecosystem. I think that that is a great motivation for people to keep going, right? And that was one of the questions that I had for you because, of course, like by the end of 2025, 2026, something big happened, right? That is both the Flutter.dev website and the Dart.dev website, they got rewritten in Jasper, but that there's like 3 years in between that in which like you kept going without like that commitment from Google or something like that. What kept you going during that time?
So I mean, there were also times I didn't really work on it, especially through 2023 and like early 2024. I didn't really much work on it there. It was mostly a motivation thing, um, to like, yeah, get myself to spend time on it while I didn't had that much people using it, or like not much attention for it. But somehow I kept going, mostly also just because I liked it as a side project, and I learned a lot while building it. Um, and I enjoyed really like diving deep on the technical challenges of like how do you actually build a framework, um, and discovering that it's not only about like the core maybe algorithm or structure, but you have to build really a lot of stuff around it, to have a good developer experience, some tooling around it, and so on and so on. So that kind of kept me going. Yeah, and then like it started ramping up. People paid more attention to it, and at some point I made a Discord, and people. That was kind of when more people joined the Discord. There was like more active people interacting with it and like asking questions. Um, and yeah, that was then definitely also a big part to the motivation.
So now let's talk about the what I call the big moment, right? And it's like the Flutter and the Dart teams, they approach you to build their official sites with Jasper. How did that happen? And what was that initial kind of like approach? Did they tell you like fully the scope and intent of the project?
So that's actually funny. I met Parka from the Dart team 2 years ago at Flutter and Friends in Stockholm, and I didn't know he was on the Dart team when I met him. It was just like I had a talk there about Jasper, and afterwards he came up to me. We started talking. He said he liked it. He said, "Yeah, wouldn't it be cool if like the Dart website would was built with it?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure. One can dream. I don't know." And then at some point he said, "Yeah, but by the way, I'm working on the Dart team." Um, and yeah, so they were actually considering it at that point, or like at least looking at it, and trying to evaluate it. And then afterwards, me and Parker started kind of exchanging ideas and drafting of like what is still missing in Jaspr to actually build the website with it. Which a big part was like, so the docs, so Dart and Flutter docs are fully like Markdown based. So any content is in Markdown files. So Jaspr needed a good system to render Markdown files and do kind of the traditional static site generation. So I kind of built a whole sub framework for doing that kind of thing, while always getting the feedback from Parker and the team of like what they need. And that's how we built the Dart website, which was first. And then I kind of I could convince them to let me build or do the migration for the Flutter docs website, which was really cool. And yeah, that's how we got there.
Nice. And then, of course, like all this was made public with the announcement of Flutter 338, right? Like it's up until like actually very recently, that was the last stable release that the Flutter team had. Emma Twersky, who leads now the at Flutter, like made that announcement, and her quote is literally, "The team was so impressed that they migrated both Dart.dev and docs.flutter.dev." How did you feel reading that for the first time?
Yeah, it was crazy. I didn't know she would put that in the post, and it was, yeah, I really enjoyed it. Of course, it's a big feeling to get a shout out like that. But she is super nice. Everyone on the team is super nice I work with, and I feel like they are all really loving the idea of using Dart themselves for more stuff, like the websites. So they're all kind of big fans of Jaspr at this point. Yeah.
Awesome. And one of the things, I mean, I know that you've mentioned kind of like Markdown support, like as a big part of the Jasper ecosystem that you needed to incorporate to support like the Flutter and that websites. Are there any other features or things like that that you needed to incorporate as part of like, okay, now we need to support these websites that are going to be visited by like thousands, even millions of people, sometimes just on a daily basis?
So the Markdown or like general content based generation is definitely a very big part. Um, the nice one is with static site generation that like when you build a site, the output is the most of it is just static HTML and CSS. So at that point, um, the risk of Jasper breaking anything is lower than if you would have like a fully dynamic site. So that helps me at least a bit sleep at night, knowing that it's now serving to a lot of people. Um, but yeah, I think there are a lot of features also in Jasper that aren't that much visible so far, especially everything that's on the server-side rendering part, static site generation, anything that you don't really concern yourself about with when writing Flutter apps, which is natural, of course, and especially for people coming from Flutter that are not really knowing about the web ecosystem or developing websites. Those are all new concepts to learn. So yeah, but I think there are some great features in there.
Nice. And one of the things that to me is fascinating, right? And I think that you mentioned at the beginning is that you want Flutter developers that are used to building with Flutter, they have like the widget system and things like that to feel comfortable building for the web, right? So your audience is like people that they might know how to build user interfaces, but they might not have like the strong expertise on like HTML, CSS, even like JavaScript frameworks that are like modern or current these days. How does that shape your audience, like the target group that you want to serve the best, to also like decide what APIs or how do you form the APIs that make it into Jasper?
Yeah, it's definitely one of the harder parts of developing Jasper, I think. Having this very focused audience of Flutter developers and most of them not having any web experience, and then trying to design for them, on the one hand, making things as similar to Flutter as possible. But on the other hand, I always said from the beginning that I don't want to abstract away the concepts of the web, particularly how does HTML work, how does CSS work, and things like that. Because in the end, Jasper is a web framework for building websites, and if I were to abstract that away, I would have to take a lot of shortcuts and workarounds, and in the end, build something that then again would be quite similar to Flutter Web, which I think is against the point of Jasper. So it's definitely a challenge of like managing that of how much I want to be like Flutter or like build something like Flutter and how much I specifically don't want to be Flutter at some point. Yeah.
I was talking with a colleague yesterday as I was preparing for the chat with you. And one of the analogies that I used is that with Jasper, you've done you've completed the ecosystem that, for example, they have in the React ecosystem with React and React Native, right? Like they're two different things, but knowing React might help you to do better React Native and the other way around. But ultimately, while they share some ideas, principles, and sometimes even code, they're two very different platforms. And the way I see Jasper and Flutter now is like, okay, now we have a complete ecosystem where like with one single language, that in this case is Dart, we can target the complex dynamic experiences of apps, but also the complex and even sometimes dynamic experiences of like web rendering. I think that that's very powerful to do with a single stack and like all the places where you can put that.
Yeah. I think being able to share concepts it's not as shiny as saying you can share UI or anything, but it's still a very important point because in the end, that's what kind of as a developer is a difficulty and like it takes time to learn and to invest in. So sharing concepts, sharing one ecosystem, the tooling around it, I think is already super valuable. Um,
That's great. I know that you're very excited to do a demo of Jasper. Are you ready?
yeah, I thought why not show the Flutter page now that
Absolutely.
is
Let's do
done.
it. I'm so eager to see this.
Yeah, so the Flutter website or the docs website is open source, so you can go to Flutter GitHub and look it up and kind of look around if you want to see like a really big project built with Jasper. You can of course clone it and run it yourself. Here we have the structure as like in the site directory is all the code, all the Jasper and Dart code, and then we have the source directory which contains all the content,
Mhm.
specifically all the markdown files. And
From what I've been looking by myself, it follows like the same convention that you would have with something like Astro or things like that, right? Like you can on your
mhm.
Markdown use like front pattern and things like that. So if you're already familiar using Markdown to build content sites, you should feel like at home building Jasper sites as well.
Yeah. And as I said, I designed the Jasper content package, which is this package for generating markdown, rendering markdown, and so on. I specifically designed this while kind of talking to the team and preparing the migration. So a lot of the decisions were how can we make the migration as easy as possible because before they used some other static site generator and kind of all the things inside the source directory are pretty much the same as before.
Mhm.
So it's like it was designed so that there, like on the content side, on the markdown side, um, there wasn't much to redo, and everything to migrate was just the code side. That's why still now kind of this separation exists here.
And that's a big win because there's a lot of content in there that has been curated over years, right? So
Yeah.
if you have to migrate all that as well would be like a huge effort. Out of curiosity, like at a high level, like how long did it take to migrate one side? Let's just talk about Flutter. That
So since we did Flutter after the Dart docs, a lot of the infrastructure was already there and set up. So this one wasn't actually that much work. It took like I think start to finish 3 months maybe. 4 months, depending on from when you count, which I think like it's really fast, right? Like migrating a website of that scale.
Yeah, that's great.
And yeah, and like on the code side, so on the content side of, as I said before, we didn't have to change that much, and on the code side, we could reuse a lot of stuff from the Dart website, especially like components, navigation. You know that like if you look at the sites, they kind of have a similar structure. So since now everything is component based, as in Flutter, you can like really easily kind of split things up and reuse across the sites.
Well, let's stay here in just this button that Dart class because I'm looking things that look familiar. Like, so we have this segment button. I see some keywords that, like, for Flutter developers are familiar, right? Like stateless. We see a build method that takes a build context. Now, instead of widgets, I see components. Like, is that pretty much what a Flutter developer needs to learn?
Yeah, that's pretty much. So you can think of it as I'm just renaming widget to component for all the setting up your classes and build methods. And then the interesting part maybe happens in the build method where you don't return kind of Flutter primitives like row, column, container, whatever. But instead, Jasper has components for all the different HTML elements. So there's span, there's, I think, um, if we go here, there's, yeah, the actual button, HTML element, and so on and so on. And they have kind of different attributes. The button has like an on-click listener and so on. And yeah, that's how you kind of write the build methods in Jasper.
I think I'm gonna put on my resume that I know how to build Jasper websites now. Have I built
Yes,
one? Not really, but I can figure it out.
yeah, it's especially now with AI and so on. It's really not that hard. Even if you don't have that much HTML and CSS experience, I think you can pick it up pretty much quite easily. And all the learning resources for learning how to build websites, if you start looking at like foundational learning resources about how does HTML work, how does CSS work, they of course still apply. So you can learn it on that side. You already know how to build Flutter widgets, and then you just combine the two concepts and you can build Jasper code.
No, that's great. Tell me a little bit about how CSS works in Jasper, because if you're coming from Flutter, right, like you do styling either as part of your theming, or sometimes you can style like a widget pretty much inline, but like we know that on the website, like CSS is almost like a separate file. You use a lot of classes, IDs, how to connect both together. You can do styling inline as well. Like that's things like Tailwind, it's kind of like known for that. But how do you approach styling with Jasper?
So Jasper is pretty much open to what you want to use for styling solution. In the case of the Dart and Flutter websites, we already had a bunch of CSS files, specifically Sass, which is like a CSS dialect, and we kept all that. Like we didn't migrate that because there was no need to. Um, and you can just reuse whatever CSS based solution you have. But if you're building from scratch and you like Dart and writing Dart code, Jasper does have a Dart-based CSS styling solution where I kind of built an API around most of the CSS specification. Mm, yeah. So this is now an example from the Jasper website where I use this system, where you have your component, you have a build method, and then below it you define your styles. And you can think of it as kind of writing CSS, but in Dart. So the nice thing is all of these properties here are typed. So you get auto completion, you get type safety, and it's from my perspective, really nice way of writing styles while still being in your Dart, in your component system.
That's that's great. And the type, like the fact that you have like types in there and you sort of complete, like that's a big, big win.
Yeah.
That's great.
And a nice thing here, you see all these dot shorthands actually being used now. So the new Dart dot shorthands feature actually came super convenient for this API because it simplified or shortened the code a lot.
I know that's great. I didn't think about it, but actually for Jasper, it's a great way of building apps as well because like you save repetitive keywords that just make your code a little bit ugly, and the
Hmm.
readability is exactly the same.
Exactly, yeah.
Awesome. I know that you had a bunch of different like hidden features and tips and tricks that you wanted to show me, and I've been kind of like stealing your thunder with so many questions. What do you want to showcase about Jasper? Like I know that you're pretty proud about the developer experience, like server side rendering, the Markdown plugin. Where would you like to start?
Yeah, let's look a bit at developer experience, I think. Because for me, there's always a big part of any framework and a big topic to get right.
Mhm,
So going back in the um, no, this so going back in the docs website from Flutter here,
mhm.
I actually built a Jasper VS Code extension,
That's great.
which mainly allows you for very easy debugging of Jasper applications. There are also some features to bootstrap a new project quite quickly, and you can select from different templates. If you want to create a new project, you get a few options to choose from. Um, but mainly the way it works for debugging a Jasper application with the VS Code extension, either you can click this serve
Mhm,
hint here, or you go through the debug panel and
mhm,
run it there, and then it will start the Jasper project. And since we are using static site generation here, which is more or less just a subform of server-side rendering, so there's some server-side rendering going on. Because of that, it's starting actually two processes,
mhm,
one for the server and one for the client, because it's kind of two Dart programs running in parallel. And you can debug this and expect these different processes separately.
mhm,
And you can set breakpoints in your code, and depending on where the code is executed by Jasper, this will hit the breakpoint.
mhm,
So, for example, we can go to this new learn section that we just released a couple of weeks ago, and there are some nice getting started tutorials in there, which contain some interactive elements, which are on the Jasper side just normal Jasper components.
mhm. So at that point, like the experience is what you would expect out of a normal framework. You work with your IDE, you set up breakpoints, you can debug, see your stack, see the all those things that every Flutter developer at this point would be familiar with, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So for example, we have this quiz component,
Mhm,
and if I set a breakpoint on the toggle method and click this, now you get hit,
mhm.
and yeah, you can see um, in the debug window like the variables inspected, whatever you want. And if we now reload this page, or let's actually put the breakpoint in the build method, because I want to show if you reload this page, this breakpoint here actually gets hit twice. So it
Mhm,
gets hit first on the server while server-side rendering, right?
mhm.
This build method is executed on the server to server-side render this component. And if we continue, this gets hit again on the client when kind of the app starts on the client and the interactivity kicks in.
Makes sense, yeah. And would that process change depending on the type of project that you're building? Because I know that we talk about it can be like a static rendering, server-side rendering. Like, do you always get to callbacks, or it depends on the rendering mode?
It depends on the mode, and it depends on where your component is actually rendered. So Jasper has three modes. One is client, like client only. Then there's server mode, which is traditional server-side rendering, and there's static mode, which does static site generation. And this is what we are using here. And in both server mode and static mode, You can have components which are server-side rendered, but not every component is always both server-side rendered and client-side rendered. And actually, there's a new feature in the VS Code extension that I added, because sometimes, especially with a big project like this, it gets harder to know where a component is rendered, because it depends on how you set up your component tree and how you do hydration, which is the process of saying, okay, this part of the site should now be interactive and thereby rendered on the client. But there are other parts of the site that doesn't need to be interactive, so you don't even um, compile these parts or these components to JavaScript. And because it's get hard to kind of keep track of that, um, I added a feature here in the VS Code extension that adds just some little hints for every single component that you have, whether it's rendered on the server or on the client.
Mhm.
And here, this quiz, we saw it earlier, it's both server-side rendered and client-side rendered. Yeah, if we look at another component here, we see this one is actually only server-side rendered.
Mhm.
It doesn't have any, it never, it's never executed on the client.
That's pretty cool. And it's all those kind of like things that improve the quality of life of a developer, like those small tools that maybe they're not as small when you need to write them or develop those little improvements, but definitely like developer experience. I mean, it's one of the things that always in the Flutter community we've praised how well designed that experience was, and I see that you've put the same level of care and attention to details on the Jasper side as well.
Yeah, Flutter set a very high bar when it comes to developer experience, I feel like. So there's definitely some expectation to it, or some push that Jasper should at least try to have a somewhat similar good developer experience to it.
That's great. That's great. Let's talk a little bit about data fetching because I know that like server side rendering data fetching is one of those kind of like superpowers that you might have with Jasper and that you're very proud of how you got to a very elegant solution. So what makes it so special in Jasper?
So the main part mostly is that doing server-side rendering, as you said, you can fetch data from anywhere you like, whether it's a database or just a like a YAML file. Um, but then you have this data on the server, and if you want to do something with it on the client, you need to somehow pass this data to the client as well, which you can do by somehow serializing this and then deserializing on the client. And if you're coming from Flutter, normally if you want to get data from a server, you would do something like an API request or something. But because we are doing server-side rendering, the server already does the work before you start your client-side rendering. So Jasper has a way to embed data that you already fetch on the server while server-side rendering and embed that in the response of the HTML and then kind of seamlessly pick it up on the client. And how this looks like is you just have a normal component that accepts some parameter. And when this is a special kind of component, all the data that this component gets is automatically serialized and deserialized.
So the consequence of this would be that your application, once it's loaded, feels even much more responsive and faster, right? Because it would save you some loading times while interacting with the client. Is that a correct assumption?
Yeah, absolutely. So generally, the goal is always to reduce the amount of JavaScript you have on the client. And you do that by only selecting specific component that you want to render on the client. So staying at this example here of this tutorial, only this, let me reload this. Only this quiz component that we have here is actually interactive and compiled to JavaScript and shipped to the client. Pretty much all the other content on this page is just static server-side rendered.
Mm-hmm.
And Jasper does this if you look at this quiz component here, through this annotation at client. And this tells Jasper that this should now be interactive and on the client. And it does all the work in the background to kind of look at the parameters. What does this component get? and pass this from server to client.
Mm-hmm.
Because actually this component, the only time we in our code call this component is on the server.
Mm-hmm.
So we have this other quiz component here that deals with loading the YAML data that the quiz defines.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I should show how this is actually defined. So let's look at this the flow, how the data moves through the rendering cycles. We have this we are in this markdown file for the tutorial page, and we have this quiz component inside the markdown files. And this is a syntax looks similar to HTML that is understood by the Jaspr parser that parses markdown files.
Mm-hmm.
And we have both the title here as a property, and the content is formatted as YAML data.
Mm-hmm.
Then in our code on this during server-side rendering, we can parse this data as YAML,
Mm-hmm.
and we then pass it to our interactive quiz component,
Mm-hmm.
both the title and the question parameter. And this is just only executed on the server. But because this is annotated with a client, Jaspr knows that we also want to be to make this interactive on the client.
Mm-hmm.
So it takes those parameters, it serializes them, it puts it in the HTML with all the other server-side rendered stuff. And then on the client, it automatically picks up this component, locates it on the page, deserializes the parameters, and then just builds this component. So it's a very seamless experience because you don't have to care about any of this serialization stuff and like managing how you get the data from the server to client. It's kind of everything happens automatically.
Yeah. And one thing that I wanted to kind of like mention that I think it's important is that your widget fundamentals file is a markdown file. So there's a component of like, hey, I'm just writing my custom like markdown, whatever, but then you're injecting your interactive, complex Jasper components in there. They can both be part of the same experience. It's not that, oh, if you work with Markdown, you're limited to just like Markdown content and that's it, and you cannot make it interactive or somehow complex.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, that's part of this content Jaspr content package that you can write Markdown, but you can also put and reference actual Jaspr components from inside your Markdown and pass parameters and other content to it.
Yeah,
And thereby you can completely customize how you render your pages.
that's a winning feature right there. All right. Tell us a little bit more about Jasper content. Like that's the Markdown rendering package, right? That you had to build for this. Why are you so proud of it? Because as we were planning for this session, like you've been talking about Jasper, you can tell that you're very proud, but like you specifically mentioned, I want to talk about Jasper content. I think it is great. What makes it great?
So for me, what makes it great, but that's only my personal thing, is that it came to be through a very specific use case and through the collaboration with the Dart and Flutter teams. So it was kind of the first time that I developed a feature, not just because I think that a feature might be useful, but because I actually have a specific use case for something and actually have a side introduction that uses this feature and kind of a customer that I can work together with, which is always a lot better than if you're thinking of features in isolation.
I was gonna say that since I've seen how Jasper works and got to know more about the details, I'm like, we have at VGV our own like VGV engineering website where we collect our like best practices and standards and whatnot. And I'm like, we should migrate it to Jasper after this. Like that was kind of like the missing feature that either I've seen it in action and I've seen how you can have like interactivities. Like, wow, it would be almost like a disservice to the Flutter community not to migrate Flutter specific sites or anything like that to Jasper.
Yeah, that sounds great. And there's a lot more to. So we really only now talked about the very surface of this whole sub framework, Jaspr content. there's a lot more to it that you can do and customize it in pretty much any way you want.
How hard did you find it? Because it's a almost like a different paradigm all of a sudden, working with Markdown and then might render to HTML and then add Jasper on top of it. Like, what was the challenge right there? How was the design process of the package?
Mm, so I think the challenge was there are a lot of ideas and um, customization or things you may want to do with Markdown and with like rendering content. And the challenge was then finding a system that brings this all together in a way that still feels Jasper like and feels Dart like and doesn't feel completely out of place.
Which is easier said than done.
Yeah, that's the I think that was very hard um, to make because in the end it's a very different approach to building a UI. If you have content files from Markdown and there are also some data that lies in YAML files or JSON files and um, having that as your source of truth instead of just a component tree or just a widget tree,
Mhm.
it's a little or like it's a different approach to rendering. So making that work in the Jasper model was definitely a challenge. Yeah.
That's great. All right. And the last feature that I wanted to touch base with you, that one is almost like a very interesting use case that I bet it's gonna blew some people's mind. Flutter embeddings. So now you can have also like a Jasper site that, like, at the end of the day, loaded in your browser is your traditional HTML, CSS, JavaScript, blah, blah, blah. But then you can embed when needed Flutter experiences. How does that work and where that idea came from?
Yeah. So um, you can Flutter embedding itself allows you to embed a Flutter app in any website, and this works really with any website because all you need is just kind of a target HTML element and then some glue code to tell Flutter to not take off the whole page, but just like render itself in this one component. But then I thought, so the normal way you do this is by having two separate projects. One is your website project that you develop in whatever framework or language you want. And the other one is your Flutter project. And these are really decoupled. And if you want to interact between those two worlds, you have to use something called JS Interop, which allows you to, from the Dart code, call into JavaScript code and thereby kind of building yourself a communication bridge between those two worlds. But I thought, well, Jasper is Dart already, so why like do we even need this bridging between the two worlds? Why can't it just be the same project, the same code base? Um, and the reason why this was so hard to do is because, as you might know, Flutter ships its own version of the Dart SDK with like things like Dart UI package, which doesn't exist in the normal Dart SDK. So you can't just you can't just write Flutter code in any Dart projects.
Mhm.
So what I had to do is go into the compiler pipeline of Dart of the Dart to JS compiler pipeline and convince it to not use the normal Dart SDK, but kind of all the Dart SDK assets that come shipped with the Flutter SDK that you have installed.
Mhm.
And there are a couple different pieces to it, but that's basically it. Every time in the in the compilation project process that the compiler wants to read anything related to the SDK assets and resources, just point it to the equivalent ones from the Flutter SDK. And then, so the result of this, I can maybe share.
I think that you're solving a great problem because one of the things that it's very easy to get started, but really hard to do, especially for companies and enterprise, is add to app, whether it's on mobile or web. Like, it gets very easy as a concept just to add the entry point, but like of course there's a lot of like infrastructure in the underlying, like either web platform or like mobile platform that then needs to be operating with the Flutter app, and those things they get very complex very very fast. So to me, like the fact that you solve this in a way that is like, yeah, you don't have to work with interop and it's just a little bit more seamless. It's a great experience. It's a great feature.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is how it looks when you do this. So you have your Jaspr component,
Hmm.
which you build up your kind of the outer website.
Hmm.
And then you have this special Flutter embed view, which is kind of the glue between the two worlds.
Hmm.
And to it, you just pass a widget. So here, this counter widget is actually a Flutter widget.
Hmm.
And everything below that then also, of course, is a widget.
Hmm.
And because you just, in that sense, pass a widget as a child to a component, you can, of course, also pass parameters to the widget, pass things like a callback to the widget, and just really easy exchange data and state of your application because it's the same application.
The application, same language, like it
Yeah.
facilitates a lot. I did a project with a large real estate company a couple of years ago where they wanted to integrate certain features that they built for mobile first into the web app. Believe me, something like this will save a lot of time and headaches. Yeah. So that's great. Are there any other features that you wanted to showcase today that I mean, if you look at the documentation, there's great stuff in there. Like, so I think there's more to it than just what we covered today. But is there something else that you're really proud of that you would like to showcase?
As you said, there's a lot more stuff to discover, especially on, I think, on the server side rendering and static site generation part. Everything that's not in that way existing in Flutter.
Hmm.
Maybe maybe it's cool. I have a new upcoming feature prepared where maybe I can give a quick peek on how that works.
We're getting like prime news. Sure, let's do it.
Yeah. So staying with the same example we had before,
Hmm.
which is this interactive quiz component.
Hmm.
Um, the one of the more, let's say, annoying parts is when you want to update anything that is server side rendered, either change content in the markdown file or change code that is run on the server. To see that reflected in the page, you have to always do a full refresh, because only then the browser requests again the page from the server and like you get the fresh new updated state. But because you are doing a full page refresh, you're of course losing all your client-side state. Um, so, and the idea came to me while I'm currently trying to get stateful hot reload to work in Jaspr as well, which is also hopefully just a couple months away now, since it's now supported in Dart. But that only solves kind of half of the problem, or maybe even less than half, because for these use cases, most of your content is server-side rendered. And if we are now, for example, here working in the quiz, it gets really annoying if you click through it, go to the next question, and then you maybe want to update something in this question. But when you reload, of course, everything collapses and you have to go through it just again. It like takes a lot of time. So what I've developed is kind of a server-driven hot reload feature. I'm not quite sure on the name yet. But what it does, it allows you to do stateful hot reload with server-side rendered things. So for example, if I go in here and change some, like here, the text of this question and
I
save
don't.
it. So what usually happens if you have to do a full refresh to get new server-side data, all your client-side state is lost. So you have to, in this case, have to go in here again, select the question again, and only then you can see in the second question whatever you updated. But with a new feature, which is kind of like server-side hot reload, I can just go in here, save something, and you see it immediately pop up here. So yeah, you can update server-side state, so like server-side data, markdown files, whatever you want. It doesn't only work in if you update code, it also works if you update content. And you keep all the client-side states that you have. So I can even go in here, select this, and say this is actually the correct answer, and that just updates.
You cannot imagine how much suffering and frustration I've had over the years working as a web developer because state was not synced with the client. So this right here, I mean, sometimes we're looking these days as AI as like it's gonna change the world, make us so productive. Things like this will make us very productive too as well.
Yeah,
But
that's the goal, to save a lot of time and avoid a lot of frustration. Yeah,
this is a great feature, and you said that this is not released yet.
it's not released yet. No, I hope to land it in 1 or 2 months. But yeah, so stay tuned.
Well, let's make some noise about it because I think that this is again one of those that it's gonna improve developer experience quite a lot. Sounds great. Kilian, thank you so much for like sharing like this great demo. Uh if we have people listening or like watching this episode that they've never worked with Jasper, where should they get started?
Yeah, so I think the very easiest way to get started is just use the online playground. So I built quite early on, also as an own showcase, a kind of a fork of Dartpad for Jasper, where you can just in your browser write Jasper code and see it execute. But this is limited to only client-side code, so you can't do any server-side rendering, any static site generation with it. So then the next easiest part is just download the VS Code extension if you use it and create a new project, or use the CLI, which is installed through one command, and then you can use Jasper Create to create a new project, and then just go from there. And you will see, hopefully, it's quite intuitive to get started and write components.
That's great. Thank you, Kilian. And before we finish the episode, there's a little something that I'm doing with every guest that we have in Very Good Engineering that is a quick lightning round. Are you
Hmm.
ready?
Okay. Yeah.
What would you say is your favorite Dart feature that most people don't know about it?
So one of my newest favorite features is definitely pattern matching. I think by now most people know about it. But it's like it's so elegant. You can write so much better code than before. And I really enjoy just writing good looking code. Not even like good code, but just good looking code. And with pattern matching you can do that.
For years, I have friends that are like experts in Scala and like functional programming, and they were saying like, "You don't know how to code unless you know pattern matching all the stuff." And for years, every single
Hmm.
party, every single night, I have them here. And once they released pattern matching with that, I was like, "Well, I guess I'm a real programmer now." What do you say? Give me a
That's
little
nice. Yeah, that's
moment
cool.
to brag. Awesome. If you could go back to 2020 and give yourself one piece of advice about building Jasper, what would it be?
Mm,
I,
there,
I I would imagine that one of them is gonna be this is gonna take more than a weekend.
yeah, definitely. Like, I do you know what you're getting into? Because of course, like now there's a certain responsibility to it. To like, I know I can't just not work on it anymore. Especially now with the Flutter and Dart sites built with it. Um, which like I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but I definitely wasn't aware of like what could happen with it. Um, yeah, and then like technology wise, I made a few choices that I maybe regretted or changed later on, which just took a lot of time to redo. So like the one of the more internal parts of the framework, I had to kind of completely redo at some point, because I wasn't happy with it, how it works. And that could have, of course, saved a lot of time if I did it the right way, at the first time.
Well, one of the things that I think tells great people from average people is whether they can identify things to improve and learn from them. So it seems like you did that. So, because you're in
Maybe,
the
yeah.
path, if not already, to be a great person. Next question. What's one website that you wish was built with Jasper?
How about the VGV homepage?
Ooh, challenge accepted. I don't know. I'm not on the marketing team, but I'll pass the note. I
Yeah.
can tell you
No,
that at
but
least we will try with very good engineering for sure.
that sounds great. Yeah. But on a serious note, actually, I would love a use case that is something else than static site generation. Because now, of course, I have a very big use case for static site generation and lots of kind of features that grew from there. But of course, I also would love to explore more in like more dynamic server side rendering, maybe an e-commerce site or something like that
Mhm.
requires a different set of features. And having something like that as use case would also be really amazing.
I can tell you that internally at VGV, there's a lot of excitement about Jasper. When we were planning this session, I told you, like, hey, we've used it for pitching to a big client. I cannot disclose the name, but certainly it's an area in which I think if you look at the skills and type of work that VGV does and where Jasper is going, there's a natural overlap that
Hmm.
augments a lot of the Flutter work that we're doing. So I'm certainly very, very excited and I'm sure that like in notes alone from now, we'll be talking about like a couple of things that we're doing with Jasper.
Yeah, that sounds exciting. Awesome.
And before we put an end to this episode, we've talked about server-side rendering hot reload as like a few new feature that might be coming in the next few months. But like, what's also next for Jasper? Like, what can people look forward to?
Mm, maybe so more and more people start asking me when is Jasper gonna have a 1.0 release because it's still on zero ver. Um, and I hope to get it done this year. I cannot, of course, promise anything, but I feel relatively confident that by now it's at a point where I can say, okay, it's getting stable. There are less and less fully breaking and like fundamentally breaking changes in the framework, and I would love to do a 1.0 release maybe end of the year.
Yeah. I'm making a call here for all those open source developers that they're not afraid of staying on one, like on 0 point whatever that is for a while until they feel like, okay, we have a solid framework. Because one of the worst things that could happen is that you say like, hey, this is prod ready and stable, and all of a sudden you realize that there's API choices that are fundamentally wrong in the long term, even though for the current use case might match. So to me, having a 0 point something version for a while is not an indication of we're not ready. It's just an indication of like, hey, we're actually working on the maturity of this software, but you can still use it. Like look at the documentation, look at the clients, just give it a try for yourself, right? So to me, that's very important.
Yeah, definitely. It's not about being production ready or not. I think Jasper has been production ready for quite a while now. It's more about being like the API itself being stable and not getting that much changes. And as a maintainer, being on zero ver is definitely a lot easier um, because you can do breaking changes however you want, kind of. Yeah, it was like Jasper now is on 0.22, and even in 0.21, there was a pretty big breaking change that changed a lot of how you write components. So having the flexibility still to do that is and was definitely very good.
Yeah. I can tell you for a fact, our own open source tooling at VGV, like very good CLI, that is one of the packages that is most popular. Still today, as we're recording this video on version 0 point something. And I
Hmm.
know for a fact, looking at the analytics, like thousands of projects have been generated with very good CLI. But it's just one of those in which like, hey, we just want to make sure that what we do is solid, that also like maybe that you have enough use cases to cover like a large percentage of like the things that you can do with Flutter. So again, kudos to your decision. I know that sometimes might affect like what people think about it. Is production ready or not? Like
Hmm.
it's something different. It's like a way for you as a developer to make sure that you're doing what's right for your customers. Awesome. Well, Kilian, it's been a real pleasure. I think that you have a story that is remarkable. And I feel like it's on the very early stages. I feel like Jasper is gonna go to great lengths, and we're gonna see like rendering some of the best websites in the world for sure, right? And I think as teams adopt like multi-platform, whether it's starting with Flutter, whether starting with Jasper, that communion between Dart, Jasper, Flutter, like the integrated tooling, is just gonna help teams and companies to be more effective and productive. And you seem to have a great role to play, but like you seem to be also thinking about this challenge in the right way. So I can tell you that here at VGV, in me personally, you have a fun, loyal supporter that is gonna try to help you as much as possible. Again, like congrats on all the success that you're having with it. And yeah, we're very excited to
Yeah,
have
thanks
you
so
here at
much.
Very Good
Thanks so much.
Engineering.
I feel like I'm getting very high expectations here, but I hope to make them happen. Yeah.
Sounds great. All right, listeners, thank you so much, and we'll see you in the next episode of Very Good Engineering.